Most people give up on container gardening after just the first winter without realizing why. They spend money on plants, fill up beautiful pots, enjoy a few months of color, then watch it all die back. Come spring, they're back at the garden center spending money all over again on new plants. Here's what most beginner gardeners never realize. The problem isn't the container or the climate. It's genuinely the plants themselves, since some perennials are almost built specifically for containers. They return year after year in the same pot, sometimes fuller and more beautiful than before. They handle drought, they handle cold, and they ask for almost nothing from you in return. Today we're going through 12 of the best, so you plant once and you're genuinely done. 12 plants, 12 lessons in letting a container do the work instead of fighting it. Stay with us, because the final plant on this list is one most people never think to grow in a pot. It may actually be the most low-maintenance perennial of all 12 on this entire list. People want beauty without constant work, patios that look alive without replanting every spring. That desire is exactly why container perennial gardening has quietly exploded in popularity recently. Balconies and small patios can genuinely look just as designed as a full garden bed with the right picks. Some perennials are just naturally tougher and more forgiving in containers than others. Once you know which ones, everything about container gardening genuinely gets easier. We'll walk through each one's care needs, ideal pot size, and the one mistake beginners tend to make. Drop a comment as we go with what state or zone you're gardening in, since that affects performance. Plant number 1 is lavender, and there's a reason it shows up on every low-maintenance list around. This plant practically thrives on neglect, wanting very little from you once established in a pot. It doesn't need frequent watering or rich soil, performing better in lean, well-draining soil instead. Give it too much water or nutrition, and it actually sulks rather than growing better. Lavender is hardy across zones 5 through 9, with some varieties pushing into zone 4. Varieties like Phenomenal and Hidcoat Giant handle that colder zone with minimal winter protection needed. In warmer zones, it behaves almost like an evergreen shrub, staying green and fragrant through winter. Full sun is essential, at least 6 hours, with 8 being even better for this plant. Terracotta pots are ideal since they breathe and dry out quickly, preventing the soggy roots it hates. Choose a pot at least 12 inches deep and wide, since lavender develops a surprisingly deep root system. Drainage holes are non-negotiable here, or the plant will decline slowly over time. Water every 7 to 10 days in summer once established, and barely at all through winter. One common beginner mistake is overwatering lavender in its first season before roots settle in. The leaves yellow and stems go woody at the base, when the real problem is usually too much water. In cold climates, move the container somewhere sheltered for winter, or mulch heavily around the pot. That single step protects the root system through the harshest stretch of a cold winter season. Many gardeners find it easier to simply group containers together against a sheltered wall for winter. After 2 or 3 years, you get a mounding, fragrant plant that attracts bees and butterflies constantly. It blooms from late spring through midsummer, filling the air with fragrance every time you walk by. That long-term payoff is exactly why lavender remains a staple on nearly every low-maintenance list. Plant number 2 is hostas, and if lavender loves sun, hostas are genuinely the shade garden's best friend. They're almost impossible to kill, going completely dormant in winter before pushing back up in spring. They're hardy across zones 3 through 9, one of the most cold-tolerant perennials on this list. Even in zone 3 winters, the roots genuinely survive, though containers need slightly more protection. Hostas prefer partial to full shade, with morning sun and afternoon shade being genuinely ideal. Direct afternoon sun in hot climates will scorch the leaves and fade their striking color. Choose a wide pot over a deep one, since hostas spread wide rather than rooting deep down. A pot 12 to 16 inches wide gives a medium variety plenty of room to properly establish. Plastic or resin pots retain moisture better here, which suits hostas since they prefer consistently moist soil. Watering regularly through spring and summer keeps the foliage lush without letting the soil dry completely. Good drainage still matters here too, since standing water is just as harmful as drying out completely. One common mistake is choosing pots too small, which stops the plant from producing new leaves. Give it a generous container, and it rewards you with growth that genuinely surprises most people. Over time, the plant divides naturally, and one hosta becomes 3, then 3 becomes 12. Some varieties turn a warm, buttery gold, while others develop a cool blue-gray that looks almost painted. That natural division means your initial investment quietly multiplies without any extra cost to you. Plant number 3 is salvia, and it does something most gardeners don't expect from a container plant. It blooms from early summer all the way through frost, one of the longest blooming perennials around. Hardy varieties like Maynite, Caradonna, or Blue Hill perform reliably across zones 4 through 9. They handle heat and drought well, and they're genuinely not fussy about the soil quality either. Full sun is preferred, since salvia wants warmth, and stems grow stronger with more light exposure. A 12-inch pot with excellent drainage works perfectly, since salvia loathes soggy soil like lavender. Root rot is genuinely the one thing that reliably kills this plant when grown in a container. Keep the drainage free and watering moderate once or twice weekly in summer, tapering off in fall. One common mistake is not cutting salvia back, which lets the plant put energy into seeds instead of blooms. A midsummer trim of about a third of the plant's height triggers a fresh flush of growth and flowers. By year 3 or 4, the plant becomes almost architectural, with pollinators visiting constantly. Hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies all show up consistently once the plant is fully established. That flowering spike rises in shades of violet, deep blue, red, and white above the foliage. Plant number 4 is sedum, or stonecrop, one of the most drought-tolerant perennials in existence. It stores water and fleshy leaves the same way succulents do, handling long dry spells without complaint. Hardy across zones 3 through 9, with Autumn Joy being the most well-known variety available. Forget to water it for 2 weeks in summer, and sedum genuinely does not care in the slightest. Full sun is ideal, though sedum tolerates partial shade, getting leggy in too much shade instead. Terracotta pots work well here too, with a 12-inch wide, 10-inch deep pot suiting most varieties. Avoid deep pots entirely, since sedum is relatively shallow-rooted and doesn't need the extra depth. This is genuinely a plant that prefers to be slightly underwatered rather than overwatered at any point. Water once a week in summer, far less in fall, and almost nothing through the winter months. One common mistake is planting sedum in rich, moisture-retentive soil, which causes leggy, floppy growth. A lean, gritty mix formulated for succulents works far better for this particular plant. Over time, sedum becomes a spreading, textural, 4-season plant with genuinely beautiful winter interest. Autumn Joy produces thick, broccoli-like flower heads that shift from dusty pink to deep rust through fall. Even after frost, those dried seed heads stay ornamental, catching light through the winter months. Plant number 5 is creeping thyme, a plant that becomes more beautiful every year with barely any effort. It's a ground-hugging herb that covers soil in a tight, fragrant mat of tiny leaves and flowers. Hardy across zones 4 through 9, highly tolerant of heat and drought once fully established. It actually does best in dry, slightly alkaline conditions, mirroring its native Mediterranean habitat. Full sun is best here, at least 6 hours, since too much shade makes it thin and loose. A low, wide bowl 12 to 16 inches across works better than a deep pot for this plant. Water deeply but infrequently, about once a week in summer, backing off significantly in winter. By year 2 or 3, it fills its container completely with foliage that smells incredible when brushed. The secret to successful perennial containers is usually choosing plants that naturally want to survive. In late spring, it erupts in a carpet of tiny purple or pink flowers that completely covers the foliage. Pollinators go genuinely wild for it, and cascading over a large pot's edge looks stunning too. Plant number 6 is coral bells, Heuchera, a foliage plant that happens to flower as a bonus. The real star here is the leaves, coming in deep burgundy, lime green, caramel, or nearly jet black. It holds that color through most of the year, staying semi-evergreen in warmer zones through winter. Hardy across zones 4 through 9, preferring partial to full shade with some morning sun. Depending on the variety, you get deep burgundy, bright lime green, burnt caramel, or silvery purple tones. Choose a pot at least 10 inches wide and deep, with plastic or resin retaining moisture well. Terracotta works fine too, but you'll simply need to water it more frequently than in plastic pots. That brilliant burgundy or copper color you see in photos develops best with some light exposure. One common mistake is planting it in too much shade, which leads to thin growth and faded color. Over time, coral bells creates a low mound of dramatic foliage that anchors any mixed container beautifully. In late spring, slender stems rise above the leaves carrying tiny bell-shaped flowers that attract hummingbirds. The flowers are charming, but honestly, the foliage is what keeps most people coming back for more. Plant number 7 is catmint, nepeta, blooming for months with almost zero effort required from you. It produces long, arcing stems covered in soft lavender blue flowers from late spring through summer. Cut it back by half after the first bloom, and it returns for a second and sometimes third flush. Hardy across zones 3 through 8, drought tolerant, and largely ignored by deer and rabbits. That deer resistance is a genuine bonus if wildlife browsing is a concern in your particular area. Full sun to partial shade works well, with 6 or more hours producing the fullest blooming. A 12-inch pot works fine here, since nepeta has a moderate root system that doesn't need much depth. Good drainage is essential, since wet roots through winter are the main risk in cold climates. A hard cut to about 4 inches after the first flowering triggers vigorous regrowth within weeks. One common mistake is skipping that cutback, which loses the second and third bloom cycles entirely. By year 2 or 3, the plant thickens considerably at the base, looking more established each season. Those arcing, flower-covered stems spill slightly over the edge of the pot in a genuinely beautiful way. The gray-green foliage stays softly aromatic and attractive even during the weeks it isn't blooming. Plant number 8 is echinacea, coneflower, a plant that surprised many gardeners the first time in a pot. It's usually associated with large garden beds, but newer compact varieties are bred for containers. Hardy across zones 3 through 9, extremely drought-tolerant once established, thriving in heat. Most people assume it needs open ground to perform, but a generous container works just as well. Full sun is essential here, since this isn't a shade-tolerant plant by any measure. Go bigger than you'd think, with a minimum 14 to 16-inch pot at least 12 inches deep. Echinacea has a deep taproot, and cramping that root system is the fastest way to kill it in a pot. Well-draining soil matters, but this plant is genuinely less fussy about fertility than many others. Use a standard potting mix, skip the slow-release fertilizer, and let the plant do what it does naturally. One common mistake is overwatering it, since it's native to dry prairies and wants to dry out between waterings. In fall, leave the seed heads standing, and goldfinches will visit to feed on them through winter. Newer compact varieties like Magnus, Pow Wow Wildberry, and Cheyenne Spirit don't need staking either. Imagine a large ceramic pot covered with those bold pink and purple cones, buzzing with bees all day. Plant number 9 is Black-Eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, becoming more beautiful every single year in a pot. The golden yellow flowers with dark centers bloom from midsummer through the first frosts reliably. Hardy across zones 3 through 9, drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant, and preferring full sun. It handles light afternoon shade without sulking too, giving you some flexibility in placement. A 12 to 14-inch pot at least 10 inches deep works well, with standard potting mix and drainage. By year 3, the plant divides naturally at the root, filling its container with constant golden blooms. That abundant, overflowing look makes a patio feel genuinely designed rather than just decorated. It's one of those plants that performs so reliably and cheerfully, it almost feels like cheating. Plant number 10 is ornamental grasses, specifically carex sedges or Festuca glauca, the blue fescue grass. These offer something almost nothing else does, genuine year-round, four-season structure in a pot. Carex varieties stay semi-evergreen to fully evergreen in zones 5 through 9 through mild winters. Festuca glauca is hardy in zones 4 through 8, holding its cool blue-silver color most of the year. Carex varieties like Ice Dance, Evergold, and Feather Falls maintain their variegated foliage nicely. Carex generally prefers more shade, while Festuca does best in full sun, and both need little else. A 12-inch pot with good drainage and standard potting mix is really all either plant requires. They're not demanding about soil fertility, and both are moderately drought-tolerant once established. Neither one needs frequent feeding, which keeps the maintenance list refreshingly short overall. One common mistake is underestimating the visual impact a single ornamental grass adds to an arrangement. A well-chosen grass often becomes the most interesting element in an entire container grouping. Over time, the clump fills out, and movement in the breeze adds real life to a static patio display. A well-chosen grass, whether Festuca's spiky blue fountain or Carex cascading over a pot edge, stands out. The winter interest these grasses provide is something almost no other perennial can genuinely match. Plant number 11 is daylilies, hemerocallis, tougher in containers than most gardeners ever expect. Compact varieties like Stella de Oro or Happy Returns stay under 2 feet tall and bloom almost continuously. Hardy across zones 3 through 9, tolerant of heat, drought, humidity, and cold equally well. Reblooming varieties keep producing flowers over a much longer season than the old single-bloom types. Full sun to partial shade works, with at least 6 hours of direct sun producing the best blooming. You'll need a generous pot here, minimum 14 inches wide and 12 inches deep for good root room. Daylilies form thick, fleshy root masses that fill containers quickly once they're properly established. A slow-release fertilizer worked into the soil each spring rounds out the entire care routine needed. Annual division every 2 or 3 years keeps the plants vigorous and consistently producing flowers. One common mistake is using too small a container, which causes blooming to decline after the first year. Repot into something larger or divide the roots, and the plant revives completely within a season. That continuous stream of fresh flowers, each lasting a single day, keeps the container looking dynamic. Each bloom is replaced the very next morning by another, combined with lush, arching, strap-like foliage. A well-cared-for container, daylily genuinely becomes one of the most rewarding perennials on a patio. Plant number 12 is Creeping Jenny, Lysimachia nummularia, the final plant on this entire list. It's the one most people never consider for a container, and possibly the most low-maintenance of all. Not because it produces spectacular flowers, but because it simply never stops growing once established. It cascades over pot edges in long trailing stems of small, round chartreuse or golden green leaves. It fills gaps, softens edges, and makes any container it's in look full, lush, and effortlessly designed. Creeping Jenny is hardy across zones 3 through 9, actually preferring moist conditions unlike most others. The golden variety, Aurea, holds its best color when given a bit of afternoon shade, too. It tolerates occasional overwatering without complaint, unlike nearly everything else on this entire list. Partial shade to full sun works, though the golden variety holds its best color with a bit of shade. A 12-inch pot, standard potting mix, and regular watering are genuinely all this plant needs. Any container works for Creeping Jenny, since it's typically used as a trailing accent rather than a standalone. In milder zones, it actually stays green almost year-round, providing cascading foliage through winter. One common mistake is planting it without room to trail, which loses its most beautiful cascading feature. Let those long stems hang freely over the edge, since that's genuinely when it looks most spectacular. Picture a tall pot with lavender or salvia rising through the center and Creeping Jenny cascading below. That simple combination is one of the most visually satisfying things you can do with a container garden. The Creeping Jenny just keeps growing, trailing, and returning year after year with minimal effort. In cold climates, it may die back completely in winter, then return from the roots as if nothing happened. Sometimes the easiest plants genuinely create the most beautiful gardens, and that's the real lesson here. None of these 12 ask much from you, just a good pot, good drainage, and the right amount of light. Watering that suits their nature, regular for some and infrequent for others, and then mostly just patience. That's what container perennial gardening rewards above everything else, genuine patience over time. The willingness to plant something, give it time, and watch it settle in and return stronger every year. There's something incredibly satisfying about watching the same containers return to life each spring. That lavender you planted 2 years ago pushing out new silver-gray growth and fragrance again. That hosta unrolling its enormous leaves from a tight bud every single April without fail. These aren't just plants. Over time, they genuinely become part of your garden's ongoing story. That rudbeckia erupting in golden flowers every August like clockwork tells its own kind of story too. Watching the same containers return to life each spring genuinely never gets old after years of doing it. If you want more practical, low-maintenance gardening ideas like this, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment and tell us which perennial on this list you'd grow in a container first this season. We genuinely want to know what you're planning to try out on your own patio or balcony this year. There's a lot more practical, low-maintenance content like this still to come on this channel. Until next time, keep growing your own verdant, thriving container garden season after season,